Picture this, it's 1990 and I'm 12 years old, sitting in my bedroom with this massive Monty Python script book balanced precariously on my lap. I've got it here, actually, it's on my shelf. Look at how well read this thing was. This came with me everywhere I went from when I got it until I was about 16. I read every single one of these sketches long before I saw the repeats on television, and I would pester my friends into reading them out with me, which explains why I wasn't a popular child. You've got to understand, I mean, none of my friends really understood it. They never really got it. When I tried to explain why a man with a silly walk was the funniest thing in the universe, I'd get blank stares because nobody had seen this series before. I'd only read it. When I'd quote, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition in the playground, I might as well have been speaking ancient Greek. I was the weird kid who found intellectual absurdity hilarious, who could recite entire sketches from memory.
As officer commanding the regular army's advertising division, I object in the strongest possible terms to this obvious reference to our own slogan, "It's a dog's life, a man's life," in the modern army.
My parents had introduced me to the Goon Show and Round the Horn when I was probably far too young to understand half the jokes. From there, it was a quick step in the right direction to discover Monty Python, and something about that surreal, anarchic humour just clicked. And whilst other kids were watching cartoons, I was absorbing every nuance of John Cleese's perfectly timed outrage, Michael Palin's earnest confusion, and Eric Idle's cheeky wordplay.
Mr. Burtonshaw?
Me, Doctor?
No, me, Doctor. You, Mr. Burtonshaw.
My wife, Doctor.
No, your wife, patient. Me, Doctor.
Those script books were my comedy Bible. So imagine my absolute euphoria when I walked into a local gaming shop and I saw it sitting there for the first time. Monty Python's Flying Circus, the computer game for the Commodore Amiga. My heart practically stopped. There was proof all of a sudden that I wasn't alone in the world, that someone somewhere understood that Python was important enough to turn into a video game. I remember staring at that box art with its distinctive Gilliam-esque collage style, hardly daring to believe that it was real. This was my comedy heroes, digitized and ready to come alive on my computer screen. And after months of trying to explain to my friends why a fish-slapping dance was comedy gold, here was validation that Python could work in any medium. But could a computer game really recreate the perfect blend of intellectual wit and complete silliness that I've been devouring in those script books? Well, the story of how this impossible game came to exist is far more fascinating than even my 12-year-old self could have imagined. It's a tale of creative ambition, technical wizardry, and one developer's obsessive dedication to getting Monty Python absolutely right.
And now for something completely different.
It's 1989 and Core Design is riding high on the success of Rick Dangerous. They've established themselves as masters of the challenging platformer with tight controls and punishing level design, and then Virgin Games comes along, knocking on the door with an offer that would change everything. Virgin had secured 2 major British licenses, and they needed a developer to bring one of them to life. The choice, Judge Dredd or Monty Python's Flying Circus. And you'd think that Core would jump at the chance to make a Judge Dredd game. I mean, it seems like a natural fit for their action-heavy style. But according to Simon Phipps, the game's designer and programmer, they probably didn't get the chance to make Dredd because of the previous release of Rick Dangerous. Virgin wanted something completely different, and Python was about as different as you could get. But Simon Phipps wasn't just any developer. He was a lifelong Terry Gilliam fan who'd been studying his cutout animation style since childhood. Virgin had one major stipulation. The game had to be nothing like Rick Dangerous. No traps, no punishing difficulty, no Indiana Jones-style adventure. They wanted something that captured the essence of Python's anarchic comedy. So Phipps and his team did what any sensible developer would do. They locked themselves away for a weekend and watched every single Python sketch ever made.
Yes, take Mr. Gumby to a brain surgeon!
What emerged from that marathon viewing session was a genuinely inspired thing. Instead of creating a collection of mini-games based on famous sketches, they crafted a single, coherent narrative that somehow made perfect sense even in the Python's absurd universe. The story? During meat grinder surgery, Mr. Gumby's brain is accidentally sliced into 4 pieces that escape through the BBC studio backlot. Players must guide Gumby through 4 different forms: himself, a fish, a bird, and a bizarre head-on-a-foot combination to recover each brain fragment. It's completely mental and it's absolutely perfect. But creating a Python game wasn't just about getting the humour right. It was about solving seemingly impossible technical challenges. Phipps had to recreate Gilliam's distinctive collage animation using the limited colour palettes and memory constraints of 1990s home computers. He had to fit over 100 individual Python references into machines that had less processing power than a modern calculator. His solution was ingenious: use OCP Art Studio on the Atari ST. Phipps hand-sketched every single character and animation frame and then built custom tools to convert them to native data formats for 6 computer platforms. He even created a sprite-ripper that could output graphics directly from the ST to the Commodore 64, Spectrum and Amstrad CPC versions. The attention to detail was obsessive. When players collected items, they were collecting tins of Spam. The weapon wasn't a sword or a gun, it was an infinite supply of fish, a direct reference to that famous fish-slapping dance. Even the copy protection was Python-themed, requiring players to identify different types of cheese to start the game. Perhaps most impressively, the game handled Python's trademark non sequiturs perfectly. Throughout gameplay, brief animated cutaways would interrupt the action with how to recognise different types of tree from quite a long way off, showing the larch. These were integral to the game's pacing and humour, perfectly replicating the way that Gilliam's animations would punctuate the TV show. The game even featured one of the most Python-esque scoring systems ever created. Instead of counting up, your score counted down from 99,999,999. It was completely pointless, utterly absurd, and absolutely perfect. But then, disaster struck. Midway through development, Virgin changed their minds. They wanted more Rick Dangerous-style traps. They wanted more mini-games. They wanted something completely different. Again. Each change meant redesigning levels, redrawing art, reworking the game's core mechanics. This was where Simon Phipps made a decision that probably saved the entire project. Faced with impossible deadlines and constantly shifting requirements, he took the entire project home and worked on it 24 hours a day for 4 solid weeks. No breaks, no days off, just pure, obsessive dedication to getting it right. When Phipps emerged from his month-long coding marathon, he created something remarkable. The game featured smooth scrolling, detailed animations, and over 100 individual Python references, all crammed into machines with just 64 kilobytes of memory. Each of Gumby's forms felt distinct: underwater buoyancy as Gumby Fish, aerial combat as Gumby Bird, whilst maintaining the core Python aesthetic. When the game finally launched in October 1990, the reception was mixed. The Atari ST version scored 89% in Zero magazine, whilst the Commodore 64 version managed only 47% in Zap 64. Some reviewers praised its faithful recreation of Python's humour and impressive technical achievements. Others criticised it for being too weird, too difficult to categorise, too Python. But here's the thing. That divisive reception might actually prove that the game succeeded in its impossible mission. Python was never meant to appeal to everyone. It was surreal, intellectual, and deliberately challenging. A Python game that pleased everybody probably wouldn't have been a Python game at all. The technical specifications tell their own story about the challenges involved. The Amiga version required 512 kilobytes of RAM, a significant chunk of memory in 1990. The Spectrum version had to work within just 48K, while still maintaining the game's visual identity. The fact that Phipps managed to create coherent experiences across such a vast different hardware specifications is genuinely impressive. Looking at the broader context of Python video games, this 1999 effort stands out as something genuinely special. The later CD-ROM games for the 7th level in the mid-90s had big budgets and more storage space, but they never quite captured that anarchic spirit of the original show. The recent mobile games are completely forgettable. In fact, when I was writing this, I nearly completely forgot to mention them. Only this first attempt really tried to translate the Python's unique brand of surreal humour into interactive form. The game also represents a fascinating moment in British gaming history. This was the era when UK developers were establishing their own identity, separate from arcade conversions and American imports. Core Design, along with studios like Sensible Software and Team 17, were proving that British developers could create original, distinctly British games that would work internationally. But perhaps most importantly, Monty Python's Flying Circus, the computer game, proves that the best licensed games come from genuine passion for the source material. Simon Phipps wasn't just a programmer assigned to a project. He was a lifelong Python fan who understood what made Gilliam's animations special. That passion shows in every pixel. There's something poetic about the fact that this game emerged from the same creative process that actually produced the TV show and the films. A small team of obsessive creators working within tight constraints to produce something genuinely original. Phipps's month-long coding marathon echoes the Python's own intensive writing sessions, where they'd lock themselves away from the world until they created something that met their impossibly high standards. The game's influence can be seen in later titles that attempted to blend humour with gameplay. The LucasArts adventure games of the 90s, the Discworld adaptations, even modern indie games like the Stanley Parable, they all owe something to this early experiment in interactive comedy. So what can we learn from this forgotten piece of gaming history? Well, firstly, that technical limitations often breed creativity. Phipps's solution to the memory and processing constraints resulted in innovations that may never have emerged with unlimited resources. Second, that understanding your source material is crucial for successful adaptation. And finally, that sometimes the most interesting games are the ones that dare to be genuinely different. Monty Python's Flying Circus, the computer game, was never going to be a mainstream hit. It was too weird. It was too British. It was too Python for mass market success. But for those who understood what it was trying to achieve, it represented something genuinely special. A licensed game that actually got it right. In an era of cynical movie tie-ins and rushed celebrity endorsements, this little game from Derby stands as proof that licensed games can be labours of love. Simon Phipps and his team didn't just slap the Python name on a generic platformer, they actually created something that felt authentically Python whilst pushing the boundaries of what was possible on 1990s hardware. So the next time you see a terrible movie tie-in game, remember the story of Simon Phipps working around the clock to get Mr. Gumby's brain surgery just right. Because sometimes, just sometimes, licensed games can be something completely different. And that's all from me. What did you think of Monty Python, the computer game? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time for another journey into the wonderful, weird world of retro gaming.